Joshua heard the shouting before the messenger reached him. Men along the edge of the camp turned as the Gibeonites stumbled forward beneath the weight of exhaustion. Dust clung to his clothes and skin like another layer of earth. Sweat cut pale streaks through the dirt on his face. His breathing came unevenly, violently, as though the road itself had tried to kill him before he reached Gilgal. One of Israel's warriors reached out to steady him, but the messenger pushed forward until he stood before Joshua. Fear arrived with him. Do not relax your hand from your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us and help us. Joshua studied the man in silence. Gibeon. The memory returned immediately. Cracked wineskins, worn sandals, dry bread breaking apart in weathered hands. Men pretending to be travelers from a distant country, speaking carefully chosen words before Israel's leaders. But Gibeon had never been far away. They had lied. Joshua still remembered the anger that spread through Israel's camp when the truth came out. The people had felt humiliated, trapped inside an oath gained through deception. Some had wanted judgment immediately, but Israel had sworn before the Lord. And Joshua understood something that many men forgot once pressure arrived. A covenant still carried weight when keeping it became costly. The messenger swallowed hard and tried to speak again. His hands trembled as he named the kings who had gathered against Gibeon: Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. 5 kings, 5 armies, 1 city surrounded. Joshua lifted his eyes toward the distant hills beyond Gilgal. Somewhere past those ridges and rising roads, soldiers were tightening armor beneath the walls of Gibeon, while fear settled over the city like approaching darkness. The kings of Canaan wanted more than victory. They wanted an example. Gibeon had made peace with Israel. If that peace was allowed to stand, others might follow. Courage across the land could begin to crack. Around Joshua, the camp had gone quiet. Men waited for his answer. Some remembered the deception, others looked toward the hills, already understanding what covenant would require. Joshua remained still for a long moment. He remembered Moses standing beneath the mountain of God. He remembered the Jordan dividing before the ark. He remembered Jericho collapsing beneath the power of the Lord without Israel tearing down a single stone. He also remembered Ai. He remembered defeat. He remembered the terrible silence that settled over Israel after hidden sin poisoned the camp. He remembered what it felt like to lead men into battle and watch them fall. Leadership was not only carrying a sword, it was carrying consequences. Joshua looked back toward the messenger. Gibeon had lied, but Israel had given its word. Joshua rose to his feet. The army moved before the last light disappeared from the land. Joshua did not send a small force to answer covenant from a distance. He took the men of war with him. He took the mighty men of valor. If Israel was going to stand beside Gibeon, they would stand with strength. The road from Gilgal to Gibeon climbed hard into rough country. Loose stone shifted beneath weary feet, while dust rose around the marching army and vanished into darkness. The ascent demanded strength before the battle ever began. Hours passed beneath the cold night sky. Joshua could hear exhaustion slowly settling into the men. Breathing grew heavier. Armor creaked against tired shoulders. Spears knocked softly against shields as Israel climbed higher into the hills. A younger soldier near the front adjusted his grip on his spear for the 3rd time. Another man rubbed dust from his eyes and kept walking. No one complained loudly. The silence itself had become part of their obedience. No songs rose from the march. No one wasted strength speaking more than necessary. Somewhere ahead, 5 kings believed they still had time to destroy Gibeon before Joshua could reach them. Joshua walked at the front beneath the darkness, his eyes fixed on the unseen road ahead, while the word of the Lord burned steadily in his memory. Do not fear them, for I have given them into your hands. Joshua held onto those words tightly, not because the battle looked small, but because it did not. 5 armies waited beyond the hills. thousands of armed men, enough strength to make lesser nations surrender before the first clash of swords. Yet the Lord had already spoken over the battlefield before Joshua reached it, and Joshua had learned something through years beside Moses. When the Lord speaks first, the battle is already changing. The first screams broke through the morning before the Amorite watchmen fully understood what they were seeing. Israel had arrived. Pale dawn light spilled across the hills as Joshua's forces rushed upon the gathered armies. Men who expected to crush Gibeon suddenly turned toward a threat emerging almost out of the darkness itself. The long march became part of the attack. Confusion spread through the Amorite camp with terrifying speed. Commands rang out, shields lifted, soldiers scrambled into formation while others were already stumbling backward beneath Israel's assault. Joshua moved through the chaos with sword in hand, shouting orders above the crashing noise of steel, terrified voices, and pounding feet. A shield slipped from an Amorite soldier's hand as he turned too quickly. A captain shouted for the line to hold, but his voice disappeared beneath the roar of panic. Men looked over their shoulders before the battle in front of them had even fully formed. Joshua could feel the battle changing, not slowly, violently. A line that should have held suddenly collapsed inward. Men who should have stood their ground turned and ran. Fear spread through the Amorite armies too quickly to be natural. Joshua knew what he was seeing. The Lord was throwing them into panic. 5 kings had gathered their strength together, but no king could hold men steady when the Lord himself moved against them. The battle broke apart into pursuit. Down the roads from Beth Horon, the enemy fled, while dust exploded beneath fleeing feet, and Israel surged after them across the hills. The kings who came to destroy Gibeon were now trying to survive. Then the heavens answered. Joshua heard the first impact before he understood what was happening. A massive stone crashed into the earth ahead with enough force to throw dirt and shattered rock into the air. Another followed, then another. Great hailstones began falling from heaven upon the fleeing Amorites. Panic became terror. Men tried to run faster. Some raised shields over their heads. Others stumbled blindly across the rough roads while stones from the sky struck the earth around them with thunderous force. One man fell without a sword ever reaching him. Another dropped to his knees beside the road, looking upward as if the sky itself had turned against them. Joshua slowed only long enough to look upward. The Lord was fighting openly now. Israel still pursued with sword and strength, but heaven itself had entered the field. The God who had spoken before the march was now answering across the battlefield with terrifying power. More of the enemy died from the hailstones than by Israel's sword. Joshua felt the weight of that truth settle deeply inside him. Victory did not belong to Israel's strength alone. The Lord was carrying the battle forward. The enemy continued breaking apart across the land. But as Joshua pursued them farther into the hills, another problem slowly rose before him. The light was fading. Joshua looked across the battlefield and measured what remained. The Amorite armies were shattered, but they were not gone. Their retreat stretched across valleys, roads, and rocky slopes as scattered groups fought desperately to escape. Victory stood within reach, but it was not finished. Joshua lifted his eyes toward the sky. The sun had already begun its descent. Shadows stretched longer across the hills, while the golden light over the battlefield slowly shifted toward evening. Joshua understood immediately what darkness would mean. Night would scatter the enemy into caves and strongholds. Night would hide survivors. Night would carry the battle into another day. Joshua's body already carried the exhaustion of the march and the violence of pursuit. Around him, Israel's soldiers breathed heavily beneath sweat, blood, and dust. One man leaned on his spear for a moment, chest heaving, before forcing himself forward again. Yet the Lord had not brought them this far for partial victory. Joshua could feel it deep inside him. The battle needed more light, not rest, not delay, more day. Joshua stood where Israel could see him. The battlefield still moved around him. Soldiers pursued the fleeing enemy through clouds of dust, while the sounds of war echoed across the hills. A few of his men turned toward him, waiting for the next command. Their faces were streaked with dirt, their arms hung heavy from battle. They were ready to obey, but Joshua knew no command to men could solve what stood before them. Joshua had commanded armies before. He could order men forward. He could organize pursuit. He could lead until his strength emptied itself completely, but he could not command the heavens. He could not stop the sun from moving across the sky. He could not stretch daylight by strategy or strength. So Joshua lifted his voice before Israel and spoke to the Lord. Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon. The words hung over the battlefield. It was a prayer too large for human power and too public to hide from if nothing happened. If the Lord did not answer, evening would continue its course like every evening since creation began. But Joshua remembered the Lord's promise. I have given them into your hands. Joshua had marched beneath that word, fought beneath that word, pursued beneath that word, and now he prayed beneath it. The sun stood still. The moon stopped. For a moment, the battlefield seemed to understand before the men did. The light remained. Joshua saw it over the hills, over the roads, over the fleeing enemy, over the tired faces of Israel's warriors. The heavens themselves held their place beneath the command of the Lord. The enemy did not disappear into darkness. The battle did not fade unfinished into night. Israel kept pressing forward beneath a sky that had become a witness to the power of God. Joshua had seen wonders before. He had watched the Jordan stop flowing while Israel crossed. He had seen Jericho collapse without siege towers or battering rams. But this day was unlike any other. The sun remained in the midst of heaven and did not hurry to go down for about a whole day. The Lord listened to the voice of a man. The Lord fought for Israel. The long day finally ended, but only after the Lord completed what he promised. The strength of the 5 kings was broken. Gibeon still stood. Israel remained victorious beneath the hand of the God who fought for them. Joshua returned from the battlefield carrying the memory of a day where heaven did not stand far from earth. He had marched through darkness, fought beneath dawn, watched stones fall from heaven, and seen the sun remain in its place because the Lord answered his prayer. Some of the men walked back in silence, too tired to speak. Others glanced at the sky as if they were still trying to understand what their eyes had seen. Joshua had led, Israel had fought, but the Lord had moved first and last. The miracle was not only that the sun stood still, the miracle was that the Lord fought for Israel.